So we started a conversation here a couple days ago. We did a little bit of it yesterday. We did a little bit the day before. Many who are witnessing like what's happening inside of Warrior are kind of shocked, and I'm one of them at a certain level. I'm not surprised, but there's just it's a bit of like excitement for how fast things are moving and shifting. The next conversation that we're going to have is going to come from one of the men who has been critical at really being a rudder in helping guide without knowing what he was doing necessarily at the time. Being even confused about why he was being asked to hold the line inside of this place. Not only received the benefits of being part of the council and being part of Warrior and being launched here, and not only went on to accelerate massive success in business beyond the success you'd already had, but he became a man who not only had it all, but a man who continued to hold the line with a message today. So I'm going to ask for an interesting welcome to our next speaker. I'm going to have you actually stand up on your feet here in the room. If you're sitting at home, you're going to stay in your seats. Stand up if you're in the room. Stand up. Stand up. Chris, go ahead, stand up. Take your right hand, raise it up in the air. If you are on camera, put your right hand to the camera. If you're in room, just put your hand out at an angle, putting your palm straight out towards the stage. Forrest Walden has been successful in business for a very long time. And the message he's going to share with us is going to take the game further for you. And he'll give you the cues to win. But for now, we're going to welcome our next trainer to the stage. We're not going to cheer. We're not going to clap. We're going to simply hold space for a man who's held space for this place for a number of years. He'll give the signal when to bring your hands down. Our next trainer, Mr. Forrest Walden.
In 2006, I sold my #1 personal training studio. And I took that $400,000 check and put it in the bank and thought I would never have to worry about money again. Has anybody ever been there? Bulletproof, had it all figured out. I walked into the Tom Williams BMW in Birmingham and I stroked a check for a 5 Series BMW. That was my #1 goal. That picture had been on my office wall the entire year. Then I speculated on a $1.5 million beach house. Anybody remember what was happening in 2006, 2007 in the real estate industry? You could not build them fast enough. By the time I finished construction in 2008, fill in the blank, I couldn't give it away. And I found myself on my couch, lying awake at night saying, God, how did I get here? From having it all figured out to facing bankruptcy. And he said, Forrest, I can take it away. I can take it away in an instant. And you didn't believe I could. You thought you were so secure with your business and your wealth. About the same time in my life, a pastor came in my life and he preached a message that changed the course of my entire life. It was based off Psalm 67, 1 and 2, that says, may God be gracious to us. May he bless us. May he make his face shine upon us. We love that part. Yes, God be gracious. God bless me. God make your face shine upon me. But there's a second verse, so that his ways may be known in all the earth, his salvation to all nations. And that pastor that day walked us through from cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation. Every time God pours his blessing on his people, it's for his purpose. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, the prophets, all the way into the New Testament, Acts, the apostles. Every time God blesses his people, it's for his purposes. So the question that morning was, have you disconnected the blessing from the purpose? I was a big journaler. I didn't have the stack back then, but I had stacks and stacks of journals. Tony Robbins said, a life worth living is a life worth recording. So I started journaling, and one of the most common entries was, God, why are you blessing me? I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I thought maybe I'd be a PE coach or a high school football coach. That was like it. And all of a sudden, I was paying more in taxes than I ever expected to make. God, why are you blessing me? And that morning, he was speaking to me, Forrest, I'm not blessing you for you. I'm blessing you to bless others. I went to the front of the altar and I laid down and I wept. And I said, God, I've missed it. And a challenge was issued to me to give up 2% of my year to go on an international mission trip. I had never traveled overseas. And the challenge was 2% of your year is 1 week. If you give up 2%, it'll change the other 98% of your life.
Pause. Everyone in the audience, deep breath in. Breathe it into Forrest. Take a seat.
So I took him up on that challenge, and I found myself in the dump of Tegucigalpa, Honduras, ministering to a group of people who lived in the dump, they worked in the dump, they ate in the dump. And I'll never forget watching this lady right in front of me, dragging her trash bag, fighting off the crows and the cows to find her next edible meal. And she was pregnant. And immediately I thought of my wife, who was home pregnant with our third child, and I thought about doctor visits and prenatal vitamins and sonograms and all the things I had at my disposal, and I couldn't decide which was worse, that this baby had been conceived in the dump or that this baby was gonna be born in the dump. And God, again, he spoke to my heart. He said, Forrest, what are you gonna do with your time, with your talents, with your treasures? Are you gonna continue to pour them out on yourself and drive your BMW and have your beach house? I was like, well, God, I don't know what that looks like. So I came home and I invited a friend and said, hey, come to my office on Thursday morning. Let's just start praying together. I feel like God's up to something. We met, started praying together, and God just kept speaking for us, do something about what you're seeing. So we started traveling the world. We went to India. We went to Africa. We went to Cambodia. We went to Nepal. We went to Mexico. And everywhere I went, I saw lack of clean water and lack of the gospel. You see, there are two intersecting crises in our lifetime right now in 2022, right across the 1040 window of our earth. 773 million people still don't have access to clean water today. That's a crisis. But a bigger crisis is 2 billion people will be born, will live their entire lives, and will die and will never once hear the name of Jesus Christ. And they just so happen to overlap. The poorest, the least evangelized, the hardest to reach people on the planet. I was like, God, what do? I don't know anything about ministry. I don't know anything about a nonprofit. I don't know anything about how to start that. And he just said, move. So we started a nonprofit called Never Thirst. And we put the first well in Sudan to an internally displaced people group who had been living in the bush for 20 years. And I'll never forget, they say, we thought God had forgotten us, but because you are here, we know that he's real. God told me that I was done with my fitness business at that time. I remember where I was in my office, and I said, I'm pretty sure you just said I'm done with Fitness Together. So of course, I thought that meant I was gonna go run Never Thirst. But this weird thing started to happen. I turned my garage into a gym. Group fitness was coming on the scene. Up to that point, I'd been in one-on-one personal training my entire career. And my heart started to grow with a desire to start over and start a new fitness business. I said, but God, I couldn't do that. That's my flesh. You've shown me over here this crisis around the world. I have prayed over children dying from diarrhea. I have walked beside women who've had to give up their entire lives, walking 6 hours a day to bring back dirty water to families that they know it will make them sick. How could I do anything with my time except try to solve this crisis? And over the series of the next 18 months, he kept confirming over and over what he was calling me to do. One of the passages in Scripture that really spoke to me during that time is Luke 12. Jesus is telling the parable about a wealthy farmer, and he calls him a fool. Does anybody know that story? He says there's a wealthy farmer. He had land that was very productive, and he had a barn that was overflowing. And he looked at his barn and he said, well, what shall I do? I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger barns. So I read that passage. I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. I've had this successful business. That's been my sin. And then I'd pray and I'd journal, I'd fast, and I'd come back to it. I'm like, no. His sin wasn't that he had a successful business. His sin was he wasn't content. He tore down his barns and he built bigger barns. That's me. I'm always after the next thing. I wanted the BMW. I didn't need the BMW. That's me. That's my sin. And then I would come back to it and I'd read it again. And God would show me. That's how God teaches me. He teaches me in layers. And I came back to it. And it wasn't until the farmer, 12:18, said, I have many things laid up for many years. Eat, drink, and be merry. And then Jesus said, you fool. Now who will get what you have stored up for yourself? For tonight your soul is required of you. It wasn't the fact that he built the farm or he tore down the barns or he expanded the barns. It's when he relaxed and he focused all his wealth on himself. I said, okay, God, I'm pretty clear you're calling me back into business. So if I'm gonna do that, then I wanna make sure that I don't repeat the sins of my past. Let me connect what I'm building in the for-profit space to what you're doing around the world. I started a brand called Iron Tribe Fitness. And I didn't wanna go from what I had already built to just opening a gym in Birmingham, Alabama. I started a franchise. We scaled it. We built 4 gyms in Birmingham. We franchised it. We sold over 40 locations. 3 years in a row, Inc. 5000, back to back to back. And at the same time, I started a movement called Workout for Water. In every one of those locations, we'd gather, we'd do a workout, and it'd be a fundraiser for Never Thirst. And I'd tell the story. I'd tell the story of the people that they would be serving. We've raised over $5 million over the last 12 years just through my gyms. And I've been able to take people, coaches, clients, trainers, franchisees, to these places and said, okay, you gathered, you did a workout, you raised money, now come see the people who didn't have water, and now they do. They didn't know Jesus, now there's a church meeting and studying the Word. And then about 2016, things started to change. We had scaled really quickly. We had sold a bunch of franchisees. Most of my franchisees were Birmingham clients. They were already business owners, so by default, they were off-site owners. They were a little detached from this new franchise they bought. They weren't actively engaged. And what do you think happened? Their first-year revenue, their second-year revenue didn't look like corporate store first-year, second-year revenue. And we started to hit turmoil. And I started to face closures. I started to face terminations. I started to face transfers and getting people out. Well, these were my friends. These were my neighbors. These were people I went to church with. These were people who were on my kids' sports teams. And now they're losing their shirt on an investment, on a brand that I built, on the tools I gave them, and the pressure came in, an overwhelming pressure. And I was isolated, and I was scared, and I was alone, and I didn't know where to turn. And I was a little mad. God, you gave me this vision. You showed me how to connect it. We're changing lives around the world, not only in the gym every day, but around the world. What in the world is happening? And I was lost. Into that void steps Garrett J. White. And I resonate with Danielle. It was like a car crash. I could not stop watching. And I'm like, I don't know why this guy is in my feed. And I don't know why I'm drawn to the words he's saying, because frankly, I'm appalled. And slogans like paid and laid that made my skin crawl. But as I said yesterday, there was a message beyond the message, and I was feeling drawn. And so I signed up for Warrior Book 600, because I could do that from home. No one would know. I'd given this crazy man some money. But of course, Warrior Book 600 was just what? An invitation to sell me to WarriorCon 1. So I'm a buyer. I've never met an info product I didn't buy. Of course, I went to WarriorCon 1. You got to hear a little bit about that. Yesterday, I was sitting there going, what is this? Men confessing sin, men confessing affairs and finding freedom and support and brotherhood. And I sat there and I'm like, where is this in the church? God, bring this to the church. This is real. And then Garrett would start teaching, and I'm like, how is this man speaking to the Spirit inside of me? I don't even know that he knows Christ. God, I don't have a box for this. It's still in my journal to this day. God, what? And he said, Forrest, take what you're seeing here to the Christian men in the church. And of course, WarriorCon 1 was just an invitation to sell me on Warrior Week. So you know I went to Warrior Week in August of 17. And I went to Warrior Week, and it was a really hard experience for me. Warrior was a lot different back then. And when I spoke this truth, it got shut down. And I felt like I couldn't be real. And I couldn't express, and I was told I was too good and goody two-shoes and get out of here, and no one thought I was playing all out. I may have been the only guy in the group who hadn't had an affair on his wife. And look, I'm not perfect, but I felt really out of place. And I had the collision with Sam. And then at the very last night of Warrior Week at graduation, everyone was getting up and talking about what the week had meant to them. And I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm going to say. And God said, just tell them about me. And so I got up and I said, guys, all I know is all week I've heard certainty in body. I've heard certainty in balance, certainty in business, and you've set great targets. And we've gotten to being, and it's devolved into this nebulous, ethereal voice. And I'm here to tell you the voice has a name, and his name is Jesus Christ. And let me tell you a little bit about Jesus Christ. And I shared the gospel. And I said, if you ever want to talk more about that, I'm available. Nothing happened. No one wanted to talk about it. I left Warrior, and I thought, God, I'm not sure why I just did that. I think I may have misheard you, and I think I'm done. A couple weeks later, a guy named Eric Serwin, he was a doctor in Charlotte. He was in our group. Brian, you remember Eric. And he'd had a big breakthrough at Warrior Week. He would never tell his truth. He would not confess his lies. We were walking into the restaurant. The evolution was over. He didn't have to do it. He gathered everybody. He said, guys, I have not been playing all out. I got Asperger's. I've hit it my whole life. I'm not confident as a man, and just this huge breakthrough. Anyway, Eric called me, and he said, Forrest, I think I'm going to get a divorce. I want to know what you think about that. And it just opened up a conversation. And we started to read through the book of John together. 8 weeks, every Thursday night, we got on, we read through the book of John. At the end of that 8 weeks, Eric prayed to receive Christ as his personal Lord and Savior. A couple weeks after that, I woke up to a message in our Warrior Week 38 chat that Eric had had a car wreck and had died. And I said, well, God, if that's the only reason I went to Warrior was to meet Eric and tell him about you, it was worth it. And I thought maybe that was the only reason I ever went to Warrior. And I walked away, and the pressure at work intensified, and I felt more alone. I had started doing the work with Warrior. I quit doing the work, and I drifted into a pit that I have never experienced in my life. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't make decisions. I started to tell myself stories. Who knows that everything is darker and scarier and more oppressive in the night when you can't sleep and you start spiraling and telling yourself, I would get up in the morning and I would say, babe, I think we need to sell the house. And she'd be like, what? And then we'd go to bed the next night. I would stay up all night long. I'm talking about not 1 week of sleep. She would wake up and I said, babe, I think I'm gonna shut down the business. She's like, I was in a terrible place. Guys, I descended into full-blown depression. Never thought it was real. Never had taken medication for just about anything in my life. And it all culminated in Hawaii. Christmas of 2018, we were on a whale watching boat, and my entire family, my in-laws, my wife's sister's family are all in the front of the boat in paradise watching whales, and I was on the back of the boat saying, if I just stepped off this boat right now, everybody would be better off. Guys, I have never been in a pit like that in my entire life. That's what pressure and sedation and isolation will do to you. Even to a man who's in the church, plugged in, had brothers, because I don't have brothers like this where I could share that story and it be received. So I found myself in a sleep therapist office trying to learn how to go back to sleep and learn natural rhythms. And he said, Forrest, I wanted you to do an exercise. And he gave me a 3-question exercise. He said, this is what we use with our PTSD patients. And I took one look at that 3-question exercise, and I had an epiphany. This is a weak, watered-down version of the stack. What a fool I have been to walk away from the work. So I signed up for Warrior Wealth 2018, and I said, this time, I'm not gonna hide my involvement. I don't know why I'm supposed to be there. I can't explain it. It doesn't fit any box I've ever had in my entire life. But for some reason, God is calling me to this place. And so if I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go on the front lines. And I'm gonna post it on my Instagram. And I'm gonna talk about it. And if they Google Garrett, so what? He's bigger than that. And so over the last 4 years, I've played at every level of warrior. I've been in shelter. I've been in shield. I've done empire. This year I'm in council. And what I've found is every step of the way, God gives me the next step. What I learned back in 08, 09 when I was struggling with whether I should be a for-profit or a for-purpose businessman, God said, Forrest, there's no division between the sacred and the secular. I want it all. And when I learned that he could take away the beach house and take away the money, I learned at a surface level he can take it all away. But you know what I didn't learn until I went through depression? Guys, he can take the desire to get out of your bed away. He can take it all away. You think you bring something to the table? Guys, he's given you your passions. He's given you the things, your skills, your family, your relationships, and he's asking you, connect them. Connect them with the blessing. There's a bigger purpose. There's people dying today from diarrhea. There's people who have never heard the name of Jesus. And we're sitting over here with our millions going, God, what do you want me to do? I'm just not fulfilled. When there's a great adventure and mission that he's calling us into. But here's what I know. Just like Dr. Eric Serwin, who was at Warrior Week, who thought he knew Jesus, there's still some of you here who are completely confused about what that means. And maybe after the last 4 days, you're even more confused about what that means. I gotta be honest, after day 1, I was like, God, I kind of want to go home and put on worship music. I've had my tolerance of F-bombs. And then I show up on day 2 and men are taking a knee and confessing Christ. And I wrote right back there, I wrote in my journal, God, I don't have a box for this, but I'm all in. If you're here, then I want to be here. And guys, I prayed for Garrett and for Sam for so long to say, oh God, they're so close. show them the truth. And here's what I know. If you study his word, it does not return void. We don't have to wonder who he is. We don't have to wonder what he's called us to do. It's all right there in his word from Genesis to Revelation. Guys, it's a love letter. And say, you know what? I gave you free will. You chose sin. I knew you would. So I sent my son. That's always been the plan. Here's the gospel, guys. This is all it is. Garrett likes to talk about the gap. He likes to talk about pit to peak. Well, let me tell you the ultimate gap in pit to peak conversation. We were born broken and sinful in the line of Adam. Why? Because Adam chose to disobey in the garden. We talked about it two days ago. Before the fall, perfect communion between man and woman. There was no arguments in balance. Perfect communion between man and his body. Adam and Eve, pretty fit, I imagine. Perfect communion between man and beast. There was no beast eating humans back in the garden. Perfect community and fellowship between man and nature. No hurricanes, no tornadoes. Sin disrupted that. Jesus came to rectify our sin problem. I quoted Psalm 67, 1 and 2. We talked about King David. Yes, King David murdered Uriah the Hittite and took Bathsheba as his wife. Even the greatest figure in all of Scripture, more was written about David than anybody else. But that's part of the beauty is God chooses broken men and broken kings to do his work because it sets up a greater story that we need a king who doesn't fail. Jesus came in the line of David, a murdering adulterer. So if you think you're not worthy of walking with Jesus, just look at the people, A, he came through, and B, who he hung out with when he was here. So guys, we got a sin problem. Jesus came to live the life we couldn't live, to die the death we deserve to die. And then, guys, he didn't stay in the grave. He defeated death, he defeated hell, and he rose again to new life so that he could be our substitution. The death you deserve to die, Jesus died, and all he asked is that we receive him. When he died on that cross, the veil that separated the Holy of Holies in the temple was torn in half. Because before Jesus, once a year, a priest could go into the Holy of Holies and talk to God. And then he would come back out and tell the people what God said. When Jesus died, the veil was torn. And you know what that means now? We can talk to him in a stack. We can talk to him any place, anywhere, anytime. We have free access to him. So guys, I'm not here talking about a box. I'm not here talking about joining a church. I'm not here talking about religion. I'm talking about, do you know Jesus? Have you accepted what he did on your behalf? Have you looked and said, God, I know I've got a sin problem. Look at my life. I accept your free gift in Jesus Christ, and I want to walk in newness of life in you. Now, you plug that relationship into the tools, watch your marriage transform. Watch your body, your business, your connection with him transform. And just like I told my Warrior Week group in 2017, if you ever want to have more of that conversation, that may be the only reason I ever came into Warrior, and I'm happy to play that role. Thank you.
Hold on. Be here with me for a second. You know what I love about this? Is that he makes a bunch of you uncomfortable. Like, what's fun about it, he makes you uncomfortable the way I make him uncomfortable. It's in the chat. I love that shit. Do you know why? Because he's here to reach men who can't be reached by me. This is my brother. I got his fucking back, period. We don't talk the same. We don't walk the same. But we both kneel to the same king. I want you to see the diversity in this. This is not a game of it has to be a certain way. Warrior is going to become we. It's not me. We. This is warrior. This is warrior. This is warrior. We are warrior. We're going to deliberately create conditions for you to feel uncomfortable here. A year from now, this place is going to be radically different than it is now, as this we, our warrior, continues to roll forth. So I want you to consider, as you play this game here, you're going to see constantly men who speak through a certain way, and it's going to connect. And others, it's going to trigger. I could line all of you up on stage. There are people who hear me, and they want nothing to do. Forrest, how many people in the world you come from even begin to hear me speak and then completely shut down?
Most of them.
Nearly 100%. It's not my way, his way. It's interesting because God wants us to speak unto the language of a man's understanding. There are some of you here that with all of my intensity, you actually don't hear. You hear a piece. You hear a piece. Then Forrest comes in and speaks, and you hear another piece. You hear Michael speak, and you hear another piece. All we're doing is spinning the fucking dial, and we're getting the combination down to where he can access you. Because once he's got you, we're good. And you might be in a place where you won't say fuck too much. Because the version of you he needs you to be a different version. I'm a guy that gets to say fuck a lot. I like it. It'd be weird if Forrest was running around saying fuck all the time. Because that's not his path. It's not his call. The people he's been called to reach, they don't hear it. This has been the problem of Warrior from the beginning. This is why the whole year, brother, he's been like, will you please give it back to me? This is not yours. Let go. Let go. But of course I couldn't. I couldn't let go because I was unwilling to take a knee. I could not do it because my mind said this is how it's supposed to be. Now I'm just like, I just love you, man. Love you for who you are. Michael, love you for who you are. Love you for who the men are that come to this place who represent the different versions of the same universal curriculum of awakening. It's wild because God can speak directly through me, completely, like, traumatically shut down a whole bunch of people when I talk. At the same time, Forrest can speak the same words, but it comes through Forrest, and the same people who shut down with me wake up with him. When we speak in harmony, we nail a room. Alzar speaks with us, and now we're starting to sing a song. Scott speaks with us. Coach Sam speaks with us. Rich, you speak with us, but the version you've been called to speak. That's why, Chris, Colin, this is why it has to come through you. It can't. That's why there's a resistance at a certain level at this stage in the game, because it has to come through you two now. It can't come through me to the people you've been called to lead. It has to come through you, and if you don't feel ownership of that coming through you, they won't hear you. And there's a piece of you already knows if it comes through him only, they're gonna go this way. It has to come through you. This is why being part of council, being part of launch is so critical to me. It's not because I am telling you, you have to accept Christ to be here. I'm just telling you, it's highly likely you will. There's a difference. I'm not telling you you're going to be successful in having it all. I'm just saying it's highly likely if you play with us, you will. I'm not telling you you have to be free. I'm just saying it's highly likely if you play with us, you will become a free man. And it just happens to be that all these things kind of line up. I'm not really fucking smart. I'm not. I'm very committed. I'm more committed than I am smart. It's how I offset not being so smart. I just am more committed than most people. Most people I'm around in the business world are much smarter than me. I just have the one thing that many of them lack, which is I don't overthink shit. I just fucking go. So did you. And that's why I love you. That's why I respect you. That's why I got you. And that's why I say when you stand to do the thing you've got to do now, there will be many who will not understand it. And it doesn't have to be me, my way. It has to be his way through you. But it's going to require some fire, bro. Because they're not letting me 2 miles to the parking lot on Sunday. Unless I come in like all kinds of painted different with a dark beard. But you'll know how to say it in a way that they'll get it. And that's why we got to strip me out of the tools so the tools become the weapons and you become the messenger. And I'll back you. And then you can come to a place where I got you and you got me and Mike's got you and you got Mike and we got each other and we play this game. No man in this place will ever be forced to believe anything. But I am never going to create an environment where a man cannot speak his truth fully. What he felt a few years ago is unacceptable. If you cannot speak your truth here, no matter what it is, then this place is no longer home for any of us. Your mission here is not to convert other men to live and be free. Your mission here is to live the game of freedom. This interesting thing happens. When you live the game of freedom, men around you tend to want to what? Be free also. So, you got 5 minutes. You're going to talk about this with your brother next to you inside the room. Get me into a tripod, 3 in a group. Let's go. On your feet. Bring my lights up in the room. Bring my lights up in the room. For those virtually, gentlemen, you got 5 minutes on this breakout to talk about it. You guys are doing amazing work. Talk about this. We head into our next presentation coming into lunch. Gentlemen, 5 minutes, 3 to 4 per group. Talk about where you're at. If you were triggered, great. If you were inspired, great. No matter where you're at, you get to talk about it. If you're clear about where we're going to go in this breakout, type in clear into the chat. Give me clear, give me clear, give me clear, give me clear. Well done, well done, well done, well done. My friends, in 3, 2, 1, off we go.